I'm really happy that you're here. Today we have a special guest on the Dayna show, Rivka Klein de Graaf.
Almost.
Right? Almost?
Rivka Klein de Graaf.
De Graaf.
Yeah.
And you and I have known each other for at least 25 years.
Yeah.
Right? We both moved to Modine when our children were really, really young. Yeah. And Rivka is a wife, a mother, and her profession is that she's a homeopath. And I've personally come to you a couple of times, and you've helped me a lot. And I'm just so happy that you're here because I don't have a lot of female friends, you know, and I'm very sensitive to the energy that I get from people.
Yeah.
And with you, I've always felt like such a calm and accepting energy. So I'm just so happy that we have a chance to sit here and talk together for an hour. And thank you so much for coming. Rivka, welcome.
Wow. What a beautiful introduction, first of all. And it's so beautiful that you really keep emphasizing that long path that we took together, right? Like where we met as these young women, where I kind of felt like I felt pretty together. And now I look at myself and I'm in awe of that little girl I was playing mom already. And yeah, look at where we are now. And I also always really enjoy speaking with you. Because even though our lives seem very different, it's like I think that we have a path that can join when we speak together. And that makes it even more exciting.
Are you also sensitive, like, to the energy that you get from people? Like, I don't know if it's like a first impression thing or it's just like a vibe, but I'm very, like, when I meet somebody, I don't know why my brain does this automatic, like, I don't know, maybe put them in a category or just I understand them very quickly. And there'll be people who low balito, like they're not a good chemistry with me. And then there are people that are. Do you also feel that way?
I think like because of my job, it is different for me. First of all, that's what humans do, right? Like through our eyes, the first thing that happens is that we get a message to our amygdala, is this safe, is this not safe? It goes down to our gut says engage, don't engage. I mean, that is a human thing that happens. But I think like one of the things that I loved initially also about homeopathy is that you have to be non-judging. And so I have the honor to meet people like from all ages and also from all stages. So I have met people that are super, super religious or super atheist or in their 80s or 3-month-old. Yeah. So I always try to be very connected to myself and then be curious about the other person. But it's in my palace, right? It's in my practice. So I'm in a safe place in that way and people come for help. So it's a little bit that's different. And then I think like in my day-to-day interactions with people, I try to be very welcoming. Yeah. And that sometimes when I was younger, that would come to my detriment because it would be misunderstood, you know, especially with guys.
Yeah. Well, that's also, I think, a tribute to how you were raised and where you were raised.
Excellent. Yeah.
Right? You were raised in Holland.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your background?
That. Yeah. So, I was born in Leiden in the Netherlands. It's the same city where Rembrandt was born, for people who know a little bit of art. And it really is, it's part of Dutch society to be welcoming. It's funny because it's like you think of Israel as such a welcoming society and warm, but there it's more done in that like day-to-day, greeting people on the street, smiling, you know, being pleasant, making it nice for everyone.
Yeah, being polite.
And then I think like the home I grew up with, the home I grew up in was very, it was very important, and my mom was a remedial teacher and she helped kids with special needs. She taught people like with that were mentally handicapped. So she was an educator. And I think in education, it's super important to make people feel safe before that. And then my dad very much came from a home that was helping a lot of other people. And the truth is also my mom's background was like that, very socially conscious. So I grew up like always, and it's funny, like we were of service to other people, but at the same time, it was very much emphasized to also take very good care of yourself so that you can be good for other people.
Yeah. Where are your parents from?
So my parents both grew up in a little village called Alphen aan de Rijn. And actually, Geffen, my daughter, is going to get married there with her her future husband in October.
Wow.
They're going to have a civilian wedding. And then Amit, Geffen's partner, said, how cool would it be if we could do that in the village that Joop and Onnie, my parents, got married in 60 years ago.
Yeah.
So they have 60 years of marriage. Steve and I are going on 30, and Geffen and Amit are starting 0.
Wow.
And Noad has a beautiful relationship with himself, which is also very worthwhile.
Only good luck. It's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell me about growing up Jewish?
In Holland?
In Holland.
It's like I grew up in this small city called Os. Like the people in the States used to think it was the zip code of Holland because it looks like 055. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it would be like that, right? So there were a lot of Jews in Holland before the Holocaust. But then afterwards, the people that came back were basically the people that were in the Judenrat, in the Jewish Council, or the people who survived. Mm-hmm. There were shul services maybe once a year in Yom Kippur, but my dad always did the communal Seder. So, and then a lot of people would come from all over. Like there would be like 200 people.
Wow.
So, and like he was a member of, he was the head of the Zionist council in the city. So there a lot of volunteer work. And then later, I think around the time that I was 14, we moved to like a liberal synagogue, which is kind of like conservative, more conservative than reform. And that was really nice because then I learned what it's like to go to shul. Like I never really had gone for real to shul and experienced that. So that was shul-wise. But like at home, my parents made it fun, like Friday night, I wanted to be home because it was fun to be home. Like,
yeah, I also love Friday night.
What did you guys do on Friday night?
First of all, my dad was a huge machnis orchim.
Oh, yeah.
He was the type of guy, well, we grew up religious. Mm-hmm. So my dad went to shul every Friday night. Mm. He'd walk to shul and he would just bring people home with him, random people home with him. We didn't know, it drove my mom crazy, but, we always had guests in the house. Wow. And it was always the best food. And it was just like, we all really look forward to it.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, for human beings to have that thing to count on. You know, my mom was a working mom. It was very unusual in Holland. Actually, still is unusual for women to work full time. But my mom was a real pioneer that way. And she kind of she was good at organizing herself. So we always had the same chicken. We had like this huge chicken. And then she would put like thyme from the garden and breadcrumbs and lots of garlic. Yeah. And I would look forward to that chicken, and it's like she said, it was nice. It gave you guys something that you knew would happen in a world that is so full of,
something that you can depend on.
Yes. It's very important.
Way.
Yep. Yeah.
So do you attribute the fact that you moved to Israel to your upbringing?
Oh, so absolutely. Yeah. So like imagine like the city that I was in, it was like it's a very Roman Catholic area.
Wow.
So like on Friday there was a fishmonger because the Catholics eat fish on Friday because they can't eat meat because that's when Jesus died on the cross. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's hard to kind of imagine, but like in my classroom there was always a Jesus on the cross. I used to boogie him because it like the nails weren't really strong, so he could go like this. And when the teacher would look at him, I was very naughty in high school. Yeah, and a lot of mischief in the back of the class. A lot of talking. Yeah, but and so you asked about growing up Jewish, right? So then I had that experience of being other, but as I grew old, and so I think by the time I was 9. I had decided I wanted to move to Israel. It was like a knowing I had inside of me. I've had that feeling, that feeling in your body where you have a knowing. Maybe you had this with the podcast that this is what needs to happen. This is what needs to be done. And so I knew from a young age that I wanted to come. But then I did understand when I grew older that that feeling of being other, it had nothing to do with being Jewish or not being Jewish. It has to do with being human. And we all feel lonely together, and we all do it in our own way. And I had that excuse of being the only Jewish girl in a high school of 2,000 people, once my brother left.
Wow, that must have been really challenging.
The two of us. I navigated it, but it makes you feel different.
Yeah.
It makes you always feel different. And also, like, in your Judaism, like that I didn't really talk about, but in Europe, it's like the Shoah, like, I started dating Steve, my husband, like when I was 18. So he's really known me for a long time. I'm 53 now. And I remember when we just were together, he's like, do you have to talk about the Holocaust all the time? And I used to say, I don't know if I'm saying it the right way wrong, because I used to say World War, because in Dutch you say Tweede Wereldoorlog. So I used to say World War, and he'd be like, you say World War, you don't say World War. So we had a lot of, but yeah, I would talk about the Holocaust a lot. And because that also otherizes you, right? My mom would say, like, would they hide you? Like, if there would be friends, that would be your, would these people hide you?
So you also grew up with that, with the charada, with the anxiety, the Holocaust anxiety.
Yeah.
Do you believe that it's like a genetic?
I believe
that it genetically affected the second generation, the consecutive generations.
I know. I mean, it's known research-wise.
Because this might sound really crazy, but here we go. From when my kids were very young, every time I dropped them off at Gun, it wasn't like I would sit in my car and cry, but when I would leave them, I'm like, this could be the last time I see them.
Yes, I think that too. Oh, that's so. I have that also.
It's like whenever I say goodbye to anyone that I really love, I'm like, what if this is the last time I see them?
I have that too.
Really?
Yes.
It's something that just won't go away. Like I try to push, to push it aside.
But it's true.
It's true, but it's really hard to go through life thinking in that way. It's a kind of like a morbid kind of way of looking at something. And I feel like it hinders me. It's like it's not a healthy way to think. Like on one hand it is true. On one hand, like, you and I after today might not see each other again either. But it's like it's too hard to walk around with that burden. So I really worked on myself and try to, like, once I start going in that direction, I try to shut it down.
That is interesting. I think like the way that I do is I translate it. I think it, and then I say, I must really care about this person, that I feel so vulnerable about my love for them. And so I translate it to, this is my way, because we were, and maybe people who didn't have like trauma like the Holocaust in their background. I know I have one funny, like a water Holocaust trauma, and this is crazy, is that I think I must leave the house with water. I cannot leave the house without water, because what if I would be put on a train and there wouldn't be water? And it's so nuts because there are no trains, and but I have that in me, like the thought that my ancestors were in the trains and they couldn't drink, and afterwards they were gassed. So what am I worried about them being thirsty? But somehow that is like a Meshuggah thing that I have.
Well, how does that translate to now? Like your mamad at home, is your mamad stocked up
with water, and not with food, but with water? Yeah, and I have a tiny little bottle that I can have in my bag so that I won't lose it, so that it will always be with me.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We all have our things.
Yeah, everyone's got.
But I kind of have to say, like, I don't see it so much as I think it's an endearing remnant. Better that than It's like, this is just the way it goes.
I wanted to ask you about your identity.
Oh, wow.
So you're a homeopath. You have a profession.
Yeah.
You're a wife and you're a mother. You have priorities. How do you balance those three things?
Well, I think I would first now. That is also like we started out right talking about then and now, and like, so I feel like, so I'm 53 now, and I'm like in menopause. So I'm like in a whole new stage of my life. And I think it's wonderful. It's nice to be without oxytocin. Of course, I have it, but not.
Oh my gosh,
not in the abundance that I used to have it. So it helps me be, more connected to myself. And I think I first and foremost connect to myself as a human being. And I do not think I think of myself so much as a wife.
Even you don't think of yourself as a wife?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think that would be like something that I would put on my resume. I think I would name it differently. I think I would say I'm in a very meaningful relationship with Steve, who's another human being. And we joke about that because I say to him, like, with the way I am now, I like guys very much, but I could imagine that if I would be who I am now, but younger, it wouldn't matter to me so much whether a man or a woman. I would want to have a meaningful relationship with another human being,
Yeah.
So my identity, I think, is first and foremost human. And then when it comes to homeopathy, it has always been so wobbly for me. It's actually, thank you for that question. Because I'm struggling with it now. Because so I started out as a homeopath, but I come from this family. Like the reason that we live in that town, the 055 or OS, is because there was a huge pharmacological company there. Pharmaceutical company. That was the word I was looking for. And my dad worked there, and that's why we moved. And then my mom got a job there, and that's where I grew up. So so it was quite a thing, for me to do homeopathy. But I was so interested in this non-judging this non-judging aspect and this deep listening to other human beings. But then I always felt a little bit like, okay, homeopathy is kind of weird and it's very woo-woo and it's maybe not scientific, even though now I see that quite differently. Now I look at homeopathy as having given me a training to think in a very deep way and being able to see a lot of details and being able to unite them in one common denominator.
Yeah.
But I don't feel comfortable saying anymore I'm a homeopath.
Why?
Because I'm much more than that. Yeah, it's like I feel like I'm a person who helps people be friends with themselves and with their bodies. But when somebody asks you, what do you do? That's a very weird thing to say, but that's what I would love to say. I would like to say I'm a facilitator for people to learn to be friends with themselves and their bodies.
You know what? I have to tell you that I think that you're such a badass for doing what you do.
Yeah.
As a person for sure, but and especially in your profession.
Yeah.
And not only because of the actual tea pool that you give, but the fact that you're able to through this period of time when it must be difficult for you personally as well to have the capability to heal other people, I think is such an amazing strength. And I don't think people really understand what that's like.
Yeah.
I don't know for you if it's for you more of an effort or it's something that's natural, but I think that the people that are healing people, especially during this time, are really superhuman. They're really, really special, like concrete people who just have it in their bones to help people. And I think it's really, really important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's really important.
I would never say I heal people. I would never.
Yeah, but you're part of the process. Yes. I don't think it's like, you're healed and, I would say,
I would say I help people on their path to health. I do think it's important to say that because I could never do that for anybody, but I could be their witness. Yeah, and you have that too with the ambulance. I mean, it's like, I feel that way. Like I remember October 7th, like, woo, our world, crazy. And I've had other October 7ths in my life, as all human beings, have hard things happen to them. And I know that my first to go to is then to say, I need to now take exquisite care of myself. And then I need to be whole and I need to be calm and inside of me and in the here and now. And then, yes, it is to also take care of others. But there, Dafka, I feel like now that I'm 53, I used to be so in service. And I would take care of myself, but it would be for the sole purpose of And I would take a lot of pleasure in being there for myself. It's enjoyable.
So is that what you're promoting in your clinic, is that people should like self-care first?
Yeah. I started,
because you can't control your environment. You can't control situations.
No.
The only thing that you can control is, what's going on inside you.
So I told you, right? So I have my partner, Dorit Shoshani. So she and I have developed, like, if you talk badass, that's badass, like a method called the GPS within. And the whole idea of a GPS is that when I would go drive to you, to Dayna Kaplan, the first thing the GPS needs is the information where I am. Without that, there is no route to you. And if routes are relationships and locations are people, then the first thing you need to know is like, what are your boundaries? What are your needs? And it's really, really hard for people to do that. But once I brought in that concept, and like this GPS has been built over the years and we're slowly stepping out into the world, or not slowly, full force, I should say. It always feels too slow, right? It's like,
totally.
You always, because you see this vision and I know how many people we can help. And it's like, no, yalla. But okay, at our own pace, But so this whole idea of like, self-care, and not just self-care, it's actually the relationship with yourself. It's to withstand the fact that you're having sensations and that you have things happening in your body and not trying to make them go away, but to be there and to notice and then to see what is happening and then to recognize when you cannot stand it, because it happens to me all the time, right? The way that I kind of explain in my practice is that we have an adult brain and we have a child brain, and there are fancy words for that, like your limbic brain, but I won't go there. So an adult brain and a child brain. And when we're in our child brain, all we want is like for somebody to help us because we feel so powerless. But if we've had parenting, and we're lucky, and I was lucky like that, where there were parents that were there for you, you develop an inner parent inside of you that can be there for you. Now, if you haven't had that, you can learn to be that, and you can kind of borrow other people's brains to learn to do that. So in a therapeutic setting, I can be that parental role for people who, who don't know how to have a relationship with themselves. But having a relationship with yourself and like showing up for yourself and knowing that you can count on yourself and that hard things can happen, but you'll always have you, like, wow, that's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And so like, for me, that is like the path that Dorit and I are taking together. And I'm also so lucky that I'm not alone anymore, because that's also show thing, like I built my practice by myself. I think like Dorit and I have been working together for like 12 years, but up till then, at least 18 years, it was just me. And it was me because I didn't trust anybody else.
Yeah.
And that was because I have a Holocaust background where people can turn on you and life can change. And
Rivka, I'm a huge control freak.
Yep.
It's becoming an issue, I think. Like I'm now that I'm very aware of it. Yeah. I'm starting to release the reins in certain situations, but I'm not a control freak because I want to be. I'm a control freak because I had to be, because I didn't have anyone else to depend on.
Yes, there you go.
So it's like I want to trust people. Yeah. I also want to trust myself.
You first have to trust
right?
You. Yes.
So that's what I'm working on right now, and I'm very careful about checking.
Yes.
What feels good for me, what doesn't feel good for me. And I think, like, you're right. I mean, after October 7th, when I definitely felt like I had some kind of break.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in a long time where I didn't have that internal voice to say to me, everything is going to be okay. You're strong enough to get over to get over this. And there was no, I didn't have that voice.
Yeah.
I felt totally powerless and out of control, which is really difficult for someone who's a control freak. So what I wanted to ask you is that, like, in your clinic, when you have people, I mean, have you had a rise in patients since the beginning
About
of the
anxiety.
war?
So because I'm developing the GPS within,
Yeah.
I'm not taking new patients. So no. So I have, and it's a really big schut actually to dive deeper into, into the lives of the patients into their lives. But would you allow me to talk a bit about your break? Like what?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure. I think it's really important
because it could be, I think like what a gift that you broke, because it's like, I think like when we have trauma, like for example, I think we all get, okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. The way that I look at health is that we have the ability to adapt to a given circumstance, and that can be mentally or that can be in our body. And we all get stuck because disease is part of life. And this is kind of like, when we stop, when there's a stuckness, then we have a new opportunity, to recalculate a route, to talk with GPS terms. So when you broke and you, for the first time in your life, were not able to say, oh, you can get over this, could also, a break can be a breakthrough, because it can help you re-look and revisit. So I did not break. Usually what I was very, very good at is to skip over. So because both my parents, had childhood trauma because of the Shoah, and they, thank God, were strong and resilient and were able to move out. But very much what I learned in my family is like, you can name it and then you move on and then you look forward and what I took from that as a child is to always, is to name, to recognize, but not to be able to feel and not have my body go through the full experience of anxiety. And I'm learning that now. I'm learning more to accept, and then, so I move through rather than I move on. So you're talking about control. And then it's like what happens is that when we have these childhood tricks, it's like they're very adaptive when we're children, because if there are no adults taking care of you, of course, as a child, you become controlling because there's nobody out there. But then it becomes the only trick in your bag. And then it becomes the only thing you can do instead of it becoming a strategy. Like for me, my only strategy was to skip over my feelings. It's like funny because I'm kind of, I don't think a lot of people know that I'm a newcomer to emotions. I speak emotions, but that's here. That's not feeling it. Yeah. So when it comes to the feeling part, I'm a newcomer in this life. And so this is what I'm learning now. And so I think a break can be a breakthrough where, I started having all these things in my body that were hurting like hell. And it's like, I needed to learn how to feel,
So do you think, Rivka, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I'm going to forget if I don't ask you. My process when something happens, something significant, is that it takes me a while to digest it. Mm-hmm. I analyze it, I break it down into little pieces, and that's how I eventually deal with it.
Yeah.
With the situation in Israel, I can't break it down. No. I can't digest it. It doesn't make any sense to me. No. And therefore I can't figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, because yeah. Should you want me to share how I look at that part?
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course.
So I kind of, the way that I look at it is that there's nothing to deal with because it is totally and utterly out of our control. And what happens to us is like an almost inhuman exercise in mindfulness. And it's like there's a very complex world, and there are more and more. Here I kind of I'm speaking for Steve. Steve is he has a PhD in ethnopolitical conflict, and so we do a lot of talking together. A lot of what I do in micro, he looks at in macro. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I borrow a little bit of his terminology, but it's a very complex situation where there's a lot of things happening. We don't know who's going to react against whom. And so really, there's nothing to understand except for taking good care of ourselves. Now, in our GPS, we have something called the 4 tires, which I think is a gift I would love to give to anybody who's listening. Take notes. It's an amazing tool. It's just like a car needs air in the tires, but not too much and not too little in order to be able to drive. So in these times of like panic that we are in, there are like 4 tires that we can fill. One is our sleep and wake tire. So we sleep enough, but we're also are awake enough. One is our movement tire. We move enough, we exercise enough, but we also rest enough. One is our nourishment tire. We eat enough, but we also fast enough. And the other one is our structure tire. So we have structure, but we're also flexible. And so when I get into these panic modes, I'm not outward focused. I'm not like a child looking for help, because I'm the adult in the room, and I am going to look at me and at little Rivka inside who's freaking out, like right before I parked here, I called you, right? I think I heard a siren. Like, you don't think my whole body was like, but the adult Rivka was like, okay, this is scary for you. You're here. Soon you're going to see Dayna. I'm sure there's a safe room there if there's really something going on. So, we say these things to ourselves. And then afterwards, I always go to my 4 tires. I make sure I sleep. I make sure I eat. I make sure I exercise, and I make sure I have structure. But I also make sure of the other things, that I don't eat, that I'm awake, that I rest, which I never knew how to do, and that I'm flexible. So you need all of that. You need air in your tires, but it's never a full one, right? Because otherwise it would explode.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's my trick in my bag. It's like, there's nothing to figure out. There's just taking care of me. And then when I'm full, the giving will flow, because humans are giving people. And so I do that in my job. But somebody who is recording a podcast does it like that. And somebody, who is, how do you say, like an accountant, does it by figuring out numbers. Is we all give in our own way. You just need to keep going until you can go. And then you'll figure that out in that moment. That's kind of how I go about it.
I see the way that the Israeli population in general deals with, these situations. Yeah. And I don't know if it's healthy or not, just sweeping things under the rug all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look at it as a strength, just to be able to get back into a shigra, into a routine very quickly, or psychotic. Yes. That people just are not dealing with things that are happening, very serious things that are happening.
Yeah.
And it worries me. I mean, especially at Mada, I see a lot of people going through difficult time, a lot of anxiety, disorders, and a lot of heart issues and things. It's just, it's really, really challenging.
Yeah, and it's hard to see. But I think that goes back to like strategies. It's like, if it's your only trick in the bag, if you can only say, "Yeah, beseder, it will be okay," then that's not healthful, because that's not an adaptive thing. You need to have a bag full. So sometimes you say it will be okay. And sometimes you freak out and you lose your shit, and then you gather it. But it needs to be strategies. And I also think intention is important there, is to acknowledge that, like, when you say "Yeah, beseder," you still know that that's something you're saying to calm yourself down, and that it's not necessarily the full truth. It's like, again, are you the adult in the room, or are you the child? And like this whole thing, like I think
sometimes I'm the child. I'll be quite honest with you.
And we are, but that's good. And then it's good to understand that. So all that means is not that it's bad to be a child, because children are both delightful and they show when there is alarm. But all it means is that you need to work on the adult voice at that moment. And
but I am the adult voice. Like sometimes I feel like I'm not allowed to be the child in the room. I think my kids look to me. I'm letting them down if I'm not like the strong one.
But I want to challenge you there, because I think that it's the child voice that pretends it's an adult. I think that when we speak like that, and when we think we need to be strong for our children, and we can't show that we are scared, that we model the child that didn't have adults around them to help them cope. And that it can sometimes be the most adult thing to say, that that you describe everything that's going on in your body, and you just say, this is our reality. Like one of the things in the GPS, we have 4 steps. We have collect, connect, disconnect, and then there is something called zoom out. But just for the moment, and the step of connect is not about connection, but it is about reality taking place. And like to be able to withstand reality is not to pretend that we're different than we are. I think sometimes it can be meaningful for children to see us falling apart and saying at the same time, I'm still your mother. This is, wait a minute. This is this is a break. It's really hard for me. And I'm an adult and I will put myself together and soon I will be there. Of course, it depends, right? If you have a 4-year-old, it's very different. I'm thinking of my children, right? And children our age that are older. Yeah. That I think it is meaningful for them to get modeling of, I'm going through a hard time. I can be with the fact that it's hard for me. I will find tools to help myself. And soon something different will happen and there will be a different experience. Like this experience is not forever. But for a child to get one message here and to feel another message there, I think that that is the most terrifying thing for any child to happen. So to go through a really hard thing and then pretend as if you're not feeling what you're feeling, I think is scarier for children than to see like, wow, my mom has feelings too, and this is hard for her now.
I don't know why I grew up with the thought that a parent should always have like that image of confidence and the fact that they're all, they can fix any problem, even if it's not 100% true. I always felt like for a kid, that must be so scary if you have a parent who's always afraid, who's always fragile. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I almost feel like even though I'm very into being as real as possible, sometimes putting on that face of like courage and confidence might be better off for the kids.
If it's done with intention, and if it's not your only trick in your toolbox. So I hear what you're saying. You're saying like children, when they have a parent who's always scared, but I'm not talking about always. I'm talking about one moment of reality where they see a scared parent and then they get to have a model of that parent putting themselves together afterwards and being strong again. And for a child to see a parent who has a hard time and then a parent who puts themselves together gives them the hope that when they are adults and they'll go through a hard time, they will be able to do that too. And so it's sometimes it's very necessary. Like, for example, when your child is freaking out, it's not very handy to freak out together with them, to be reactive, yeah? And so, but it needs to be a strategy. You need to be mindful of when you do it. And so, no, I don't think that it's healthy. It's like, right, in sports, what indicates heart health? If there's high variability, if you can get huge like pulse and then it goes down quickly, right? It's like when you're adaptive. And so it's the same with moods and it's the same with fear. These are all emotions. It's like sometimes I say I'm the president of the Welcome All Emotions Club. It's like it's a wide range and they're just moments in time. They're pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and they move. And nothing's forever. That's our child brain that thinks that things are forever and always.
But were your kids in the army during this Find Miluim?
Yes, yeah. And
were they at home or were they in a base?
So Noad, my son, was also in the strip, and those were really, really, really hard days for me and Steve. Or maybe I should even say for Steve and me, because I had, like Steve and I had this like deal that he would be calm and then I could be not calm, and that went out of the window after October 7th. So I had to really hold space for him having a hard time.
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't have a partner to go through,
and that is
go
really
with it through.
Go through this together.
Whatever.
To have another person care so deeply at the same time that you are in a deep connection with.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure their dad also.
It was a very lonely feeling.
Very hard. Oh,
but what I wanted to ask you was when you were talking about putting up a front to your kids. When my boys would call me from the army, and it wasn't obviously on a regular basis. I mean, my son who was in Gaza, they took his phone away right away, and I didn't speak to him for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so when he called me, it was like a mind fuck. Like you don't know. Like I just wanted to just break out in tears. You know, I just wanted to just lishpoch alav everything that I was feeling, my how petrified I was, and how much I missed him. And then I'm thinking, like, how is it going to make him feel? He doesn't need to have that pressure on him. Like he's going through enough.
Exactly.
But I'm like, and it's selfish to say, but I'm like, well, how do I release my feelings? How do I express my feelings? I want him to know how much I love him and care about him, and why should I hold back? And also, and from his point of view, like they had sichot to them about telling them of how to talk to us, to the parents, what things to avoid saying. You know, they always talked about whether they should tell their parents exactly where they were. Maybe they should lie. There were some boys who said they were in another place to save their parents. So that issue was really, really significant for me. And having to deal with it, you know, that intention. I really had to set intention. And it was probably one of the hardest things I had to do was to really not express myself.
Like that.
And it was mamash, like just smiling through my tears on the phone, you know, like blowing my nose at the side. I had no idea how to. I'm sure a lot of people go through that, you know. It was hard.
Very, very, very hard.
Did you encounter that kind of thing?
Well, I think, yes, obviously. And also so it's really good that you bring this because it clarifies and it brings nuance to our conversation, you know, that there you had a job to do. You were there, you were solely the mother of your child, and the person who had more needs was absolutely your adult child, but your child at the moment. And so, of course, when I would speak to Noad or when I would be riding with him, I mean, I was like busy with my 4 tires, right? I was like, I gotta take good care of myself so that I can be okay with him. So I feel that I tried very much to hold space for his experience. I was like you, but I was very lucky because I had a husband, and I'm blessed with very, very dear friends, and I'm blessed with a family, and I'm blessed with a partnership with Dorit, so I had a lot of place where I could discuss and say how I was. So I was very fortunate that way. So then it's easier to say when you feel like you're not breaking down, it's easier to say it's okay to sometimes show vulnerability. It's from a different place. You know, dvarim sheroim mikan lo roim misham. It's like to be a parent that goes through that by themselves. Like, whoa. It's like I really feel like we need a moment of silence for it, you know? Yeah. Like how to, and compassion for that.
Yeah, well, yes. I instead of dwelling on how difficult it is and was, I really try to find ways to strengthen myself, you know, physically and mentally, and really be a part of as much as possible things that Oseli Tov,
of course.
You know, people, friends, and you know, I went away. I went to Chutz La'aretz last week.
Yeah, right. Amazing.
I was in Portugal, and it was incredible. I'm really trying, like you said, to do self-care.
Yes.
You know, and
I want to just did you want to? Yeah, I think like maybe another thing that I always say to Noad, because you have 2 kids, but you're like different parent to each kid. So somehow when Geffen cries and loses it, I can be so zen. I'm like Miss Buddha. But somehow when no aunt cries, it always makes me cry. It's funny. And then I always say to him, I'm crying, but you should know I'm really strong. And you need to bring on all your feelings. Don't spare me. I can handle whatever you're saying. And so, and I said, you know that, right? And he's like, yeah, I know, So I just wanted to say that I still think that it's important to name what we're going through, but maybe not make it center stage, not make it the only thing, because I know that kids feel. And kids feel when we're going through a hard time and when we're pretending. And so I did do in the war. I would say it. I wish I wouldn't have to talk to you being in a war. Yes, stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to touch upon something that I think is magniv about you is that you're married.
Oh, I love your smile. I was like, what you got to talk about?
No, for me, it's like an enigma, marriage, knowing someone who's in a marriage or a partnership that they're really happy in. For me, like most of and this is a real generalization, but a lot of the married people that I know now, I feel like they're in their marriage because they're just used to it. They don't want to break up a family. It's more out of convenience. I wonder how many, what percentage of those people would actually stay together if someone was like, you have a chance to just break free,
Wow. Yeah.
And I want to know what it's like.
It's fun.
It's fun.
Yes, it is.
You're a real statistic,
Maybe I am. Maybe not. Yeah.
So what's the secret?
So what's the secret? So the secret is there is no secret. The secret, I think the way that and I think Steve would be okay with me saying this. I think Steve joined me more in my vision over the years. It wasn't always for him like this, but I think that I have a talent of holding the relationship sacred. Without tooting my horn, but it's okay to say that I think about myself. It's like, I know how to keep the relationship in view. So I always look at it together. And over the years, Steve has joined me on that path. And he has done his own self-development work. And we have a lot of very, really deep, interesting conversations. He's Steve makes me laugh. He's a very funny guy. And we've gone to a point where we've learned to talk about our relationship too, without it being a personal thing. So it's like there's this thing we want to take care of, and it's our relationship. And what do we need to do to make that happen? And so, Do you
ever get bored of him?
Not really, but
you
maybe
go to sleep with the same person every night, right?
Yeah.
Does that not
bore me? No.
Does that annoy you?
No, it's so funny.
No, maybe not. Maybe not.
I take care of myself in a way too. Let's say Steve is not a fashion kind of guy, but I'm a very visual person, and it's really important for me that he looks good. So I'm like, did you forget to put mask in your hair? And he's like, no, I put mask. And he's like, oh no, I didn't do the spritz. I make sure that he looks hot. Now we went to shop for wedding suits. So the guy puts a suit on him. I'm like, nah, it's not it. And I said to the guy, I said, I know he can look really hot, and then when he came out, and it was so I also take care that he wears the clothes that I love seeing him in, right? That he wouldn't do naturally. So, but you're talking about different type of bored.
I'm talking about, well, not only with sex, but I'm talking about did you ever want to be with anyone else besides Steve?
Of course. All the time. Yeah. Of course I did. It's like I'm a woman. And
do men hit on you?
Yeah, of course.
And what do you do about that?
Well, sometimes I enjoyed it, and I would play it a little bit more when I was younger. Now I'm not so interested in that. But let's say in my 40s or my late 30s, and then it would be kind of a nice, interesting flirt. But I would always tell Steve about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's
important. It's important.
Yeah, that was it for me. It was important. I don't know if it is an important thing, but for me that was important. And
Well,
now,
isn't honesty like the foundation of a relationship?
no, honesty is one of the strategies that you can use at given times when the time is right. Yeah.
You don't always have to be honest in a
No,
relationship?
I don't think so. I don't think you need to tell the, and also I don't really believe in a truth that exists. I don't believe in one truth.
What does that mean, Rivka?
That's a whole new podcast.
Yeah, just we have a few more minutes, so can you get into
so
it?
I think that in any given circumstances, there are different situations where there are different needs and different boundaries. And so if you feel like a person would not be able to digest the information that you want to give, it's like, why are you telling things? It's like, it always keep the relationship in mind. It's like where a person is, if they're ready to hear, if this is the good time to talk about things. I want to discuss a sensitive subject. When is a good time? Like, I'm kind of sturdy, and so I like truth and hard. But for Steve, like, I need to prepare him. Like, I want to have a conversation. When is a good time? And part of that conversation could be to bring something in bite-sized pieces, and not,
So you don't reveal everything to him.
Well, if I would feel that I have a hard time not sharing some kind of information, I would first look at the relationship with myself. Why it's so hard for me that I need, like, what is going on between me and myself? Like, what is not right? What am I not seeing? That this is like so do a lot of self-reflection before I talk. I first figure out what's mine before I bring it to the relationship, I think. Yeah, maybe it's a whole new podcast.
Yeah, it is. And it's a very foreign thing for me to hear also. I've always felt like, obviously you don't have to tell everything that happens to you, but being candid and as honest as possible.
Yes.
That's something that I want.
But I feel that way too. I also do. But is it like a rule that must happen at all times? No, I don't believe in rules like that. I believe in what is kind and authentic at this moment, and what will feed our relationship moving forward. What will keep both of us safe emotionally and physically.
Interesting, Rivka. You could be like a marriage counselor.
Well, this is the GPS within.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the things I talk about, this is what we do in the GPS within.
Interesting how everybody has a different GPS.
Yes, exactly. And everybody has their own path.
Right.
And so there are no rules. The rule is feel what your values are and what your intention is. And if you are on the road of love or the road of fear, are you taking a road where you're trying to prevent things from happening, which is a road far away from you because you're looking at things that are not really taking place? Or are you in a loving relationship with yourself and in a loving relationship with this other person or with the world around you, And you can even be in a loving relationship with the shit around you because it's reality happening. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to become familiar with what's going on around you.
Yeah.
But not too familiar. I don't know. I try not to watch as much news as I used to.
Yeah, I don't. I read the paper, but I don't. How are we doing on time?
We're almost done.
Oh, wow. What a pity.
We're almost done. And it went by really quickly.
Yes, it does, huh?
We thought it would.
So beautiful. It was a very beautiful conversation.
Yeah. You know what, Rivka? I really loved having you here.
Thank you.
And I knew that it would be like a really nice conversation because it's just, with some people, it just flows. And ever since I've known you, it's been like that every time we've had a chance to meet. And hopefully I'll be able to have you again.
Oh, may you
we can get into other things.
May you give to a lot of people with your beautiful, strong, radiant presence. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, sweetie.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming.
You too. All right. Oh, hi.
I don't know if we're allowed to do this.
Oh, who cares? Fuck the rules. All right.
Thank you. Wow. Bye, everybody. Thank you.